Hello and welcome to Intuitive Connection. I'm your host, intuitive counselor and spiritual guide, Victoria Shaw. And today we have a guest that I'm actually really excited about. Tim Shields is our guest, and we met where it was the Transcendence Retreat in San Diego. Yep. Yeah, I was out. Yeah, it was super fun. I was out there representing mindbodyspirit.fm, my podcast network. And we got to meet each other. And Tim is a writer, editor, literary collaborator working at the intersection of science, consciousness, and human potential. He's best known for his 6-year collaboration with Dr. Joe Dispenza. I think y'all have heard of him, including working on the critically acclaimed book, Becoming Supernatural: How People Are Doing the Uncommon. And I read that one. Tim helps artists, visionaries, and global change makers articulate their transformative ideas. His debut novel, A Curious Year in the Great Vivarium Experiment. Did I say that right?
Vivarium, however you want to say it.
Okay, fair. Blends magical realism, travel, memoir, and spiritual awakening. All right, on my read list for sure. As a bridge between science and storytelling, his upcoming book, Dream Tethering: 13 Keys to Creating the Life of Your Dreams, is a groundbreaking guide to unlocking your highest potential, blending the hero's journey as the evolution of consciousness with a practical path to transformation. Tim also hosts the Inciting Incident, a podcast that dives into the defining moments behind today's most inspiring visionaries, including yours truly. So yay. And we had such a fun interview on his show. And I'm so excited now to continue the conversation on this show. Tim, welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to have to get your shorter bio.
Yeah. So those of you who are watching this as opposed to listening to this, as you know, we made the switch now to adding a visual representation of this podcast. We've been a regular old audio podcast for I don't know, like 4.6 years. And then, no, actually more, like 5 years. And then sometime this year in our 5th year, everyone just assumes we have video. So I've gone to video, but I'm still a little clunky with it. So I'm figuring out how to read the bio without putting paper in front of my face. So, but I'm getting there. Usually I don't read the bios, my friend. I usually make people introduce themselves because the bios are too long, but yours was just too good. Maybe because you're a writer. So, so I'm really excited for this conversation. I want to start. Everyone probably wants to know about what was it like working with Dr. Joe Dispenza, because I know, people are super curious about him. And I'm also just really curious about your writing process, and we talked about this a little bit on your show. That writing process is really, I think anytime we're in that creative flow, we're connecting with our spirit, source, soul. So it's really like an extension of your intuition. So I'd love to know what that experience is like with you. And then the next question is, how do you do that when you're ghostwriting or collaborating with somebody else?
Writing process. Well, I started journaling when I was 17. Okay. And I guess I didn't really know it then, but I was in a sense channeling. My modern version calls it code breaking, because I was running along the beach in Oregon one day and my mission statement popped in, and it's, I translate light, frequency, and energy into story so as to lead others to their truth.
Love that.
I was not searching for that. It just dropped in. I'm like, oh my God, I'm like writing it down on my phone. But, as a writer, I always probably have 2 or 3 notebooks on me, in addition to a very chaotic notes on my phone. So you don't know when the muse is going to drop in. So you always have to honor her. Otherwise, she's going to give that idea to somebody else. So, it all depends on what I'm working on, how I work on things. Sometimes it might come out of my notebook, just sitting down, and sometimes, there was this essay I wrote on my website, A Curious Year. It's called The Transformation Chamber. It's the most recent one. But I was just walking around Seattle for about 3 months, kind of with a broken heart, and just walking and writing things as they came in. And then, I finally took that out of my phone, and I just printed out maybe these 15 plus pages of notes. and I just start grouping ideas. Say, okay, this one's about love, this one's about trust, this one's about, and then I put them together. And I always think it's about finding that golden thread. And once you can find that golden thread and you start tugging on it, the rest just starts to flow. But the entry point is always the hardest. Like, how do you engage the reader right out of the bat? I guess we could, when I'm working with somebody or coaching, my podcast is called The Inciting Incident because I think every book should start with the inciting incident. What was it that put this person on the path? So, I'm working with somebody right now who's the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Incredible story of betrayal and forgiveness and trust. And I'm shocked at how fast it's going. I've got a manuscript I'm working from, but it's kind of it's just a summary of kind of events. So, to use a spiritual vernacular, I'm kind of taking it from the 3D to 5D. And, there's a reason why the hero's journey is the hero's journey. It's the story arc that transcends time and culture. So I was kind of just, I had this intuitive hit to plug his story into the hero's journey because it's definitely a hero's journey he's on. And I mean, I'm shocked at kind of how fast I'm getting, and it's just because I'm listening to where the voice or where the story is guiding me. And it is my voice. It's kind of like my higher self. When I tap into that stream of information, it's like my higher self is lecturing to me. And I know just to keep moving my fingers across the page and not judge what's coming through, because the moment you bring a human construct into sort of an energetic one, you shut off that tap.
Yeah, that's huge what you said. I mean, it's huge what you said in intuition because it totally works that, in all aspects. As soon as you start to bring in the judgment, you shut down the channel.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also thinking from my own life, right? So we talked a little bit off screen and off microphone that I was, a writer. I've published 4 books. And I was always, that was my happy place. Like I would say, like, I could write, if there was like copy on the back of a matchbook, I could write that and be happy. Like I would just zone out. And even when I was in like high school and college and I was writing papers, my always way to do it was I would just write, let it all spill out. And then I'd go back and edit. And I'd always be like, I'm not really a great writer, but I'm a great editor, because I would just let whatever came out of my lips come out of my lips like an unfiltered channel, and then go back and figure out how to make it sound good. And in my own process, some of writing, I think on the intuition piece, I'm doing okay. But on the writing piece, somewhere along the journey, the editor just took over. And I really haven't been able to find my flow in a couple of decades. And I think that like speaks to that. It's like as soon as you put the editing before the receiving, you shut it down. So I think that that's just so important for people to know. And any tips for those of us who have allowed editor to turn it down and get to writing again?
Well, I once said to my friend that I'm a word turd shiner. So you just got to get that first draft out, and you have to take off the editorial cap.
Right.
You just dump it on the page and then you shine it. And that's really where the magic happens, and it's where the fun happens. I mean, for me, my days, unfortunately, I have to figure out a way to deconstruct this, but my days are so connected to the quality of my writing. So if I have an epic day of writing, I'm on top of the world. If it doesn't go as I want, or I struggle a little bit, and it's usually my state of being
Right.
that dictates what comes through. But if I don't have a good day of writing, or I procrastinate, it can throw off my whole day. But I mean, I love it. I'm loving so much the project I'm working on, because I really mostly only take projects where I can insert my own life experience. And, at some point in the future, I think people will see these little breadcrumbs that I seeded across all of these works that point back to my new work, Dream Tethering. But it's not like I'm even doing it on purpose. It's just kind of a the the toolbox of language that I'm using and the vocabulary to explain these kind of challenging or abstract ideas, of how energy comes into matter and what we're all doing here and all these big complex questions that we're all kind of wrestling with.
Love it. All right. Before we get to dream tethering, which I want to hear everything about, including your process, talk about what it's like to work with Dr. Joe or whatever you feel like you can share. Because I mean, I could imagine as a writer, a co-writer, you're really like tapping into the energy of the person that you're writing with or whose voice you're trying to help them express, right? I mean, he's got a really big energy and a really big impact. So what was that experience like?
Well, I'm going to go all the way back to 2010 and when I went to my first workshop, and it was probably 100 people. He was doing the same thing in front of a whiteboard, flipping the whiteboard, explaining these concepts. And I was just sitting there dumbfounded and slack-jawed, like, oh my God, this guy's figured it out. This guy has figured out how to explain what I've been trying to explain and experience my whole life. And my sisters took me, and one of them kept standing up. And at the end of a session, he was like, "You, I want to see you." And she started panicking. What did I do? Because she was walking around the back of the room. He's like, "What's going on with you?" She said, "Oh, I hurt my back sleigh riding with my kid." And he was originally a chiropractor. And he said, "Okay, well, let's go find a room." And it turns out that before I was born, my family lived one town over from his family in New Jersey.
Wow.
And, as it goes, when Jersey people connect outside of Jersey, and then they're like, "You went to Alfonso's Pizza?" "I went to Alfonso's Pizza." So, apparently, my sister reminded me several years later, but when I left that day, I'm like, I'm going to work with that guy someday. And I would go back once a year and he would, and I would say, we'd be great collaborators. And before I took off on the huge trip that my first book, A Curious Year in the Great Vivarium, is based on, he invited me down to Olympia, Washington, and we just hung out one night and had dinner and talked about life and his favorite places that he was traveling. My goal was to interview him, but we just wound up talking about life all night. We had this amazing conversation. And so fast forward about 2015, and I went to my first 4-day workshop, and I was trying to manifest a full-time job and a mentor. And the full-time job was because I was always freelancing in marketing and advertising. And every time a job would end, I would have to change my energy and I'd have to look for work. And it always broke the flow of, the book I was working on. And I was really stuck on this chapter. So I'm focusing on a full-time job and a mentor, and I'm beating myself up like crazy because everybody's having these profound internal experiences. And I'm like, I'm a failure. I'm not doing it right. So we leave the workshop, and my sister and I land in Seattle, and I open my phone and I get this message from LinkedIn, and this guy's like, "Hey, I just left Microsoft after 10 years. We need a writer. I'm, working at this unicorn company that's trying to come up with between Apple and Android." And I was like, that's interesting. So I take the light rail into Seattle, and I run into this guy on the street corner, and he's like, out of a million people, he's like, "You really got to apply this job." I get the job, and I go to a coffee shop every day before work for 6 months. And it took me exactly 6 months to finish this draft I was on. And I was like, oh my God, I think I have a real book here. And as soon as I finished the draft, I got laid off. And I was like, yes, I'm just going to work on my book all winter. So I literally walked out of that job for the last time. And you have to think about the state of being you were in. I was totally lit up. I was totally expanded. I didn't care about my job. I cared about the book I was working on. And I literally said out loud, what amazing things. I looked up and I was like, what amazing things about to happen to me. And 3 minutes later, I got a text from Dr. Joe's assistant and was like, "Hey, Dr. Joe would like to know if you would be interested in helping him edit his blog." And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. So I wound up working with them for 9 months. And then 9 months into it, he was like, "What would you think about helping me with becoming supernatural?" And I literally said, watch how effing fast I quit my job. And I quit my job. And that whole time I was just walking around Seattle, listening to these lectures he would give me. And there was the transcripts and stuff. And I was just listening to this stuff over and over and over. And, he teaches kind of left to right, but a chapter is north to south. There has to be one stream of information that goes through. Because when you're teaching, you're always going back over it, to hammer home these points. So it was a really incredible moment in my life. And it kind of was the beginning of everything that would come. And, he demands excellence. He's a very tapped in, very brilliant guy. And, yeah, there were like some sort of rocky moments where, maybe I didn't get a concept or something like that. And I always send him a little happy Valentine's Day because at one point I was like, I need FaceTime with you. And I flew down to, I think he was living in Santa Barbara at the time. And we just worked together for 2 or 3 days. And yeah, it was really incredible. I mean, to just get to live in that information every day, you can't help but embody it,
Right.
and I'm coming up with ways to explain these concepts to kind of build and expand upon, it's a very different beast when it's in the written word versus talking. So yeah, it was really incredible.
That's amazing. You said so much in there. You said a little bit too. I don't know if you realize this, and I hope it's okay if I point it out. Um, but that kind of, it sounds like you have a little bit of like kind of that nomadic approach to life, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, but it's such a beautiful tapped in way to live if you know that you're doing it. And we're all doing it to some degree, right? Like, oh, I'd like a job now so I can do this. Oh, I'd like to finish the book so the job goes away. Oh, I'd like another project. And I happen to know that the book you're writing now, because I don't know if we talked about this personally or when I was on your show, but it was the same kind of thing. You were like, oh no, I remember when we had lunch at the Transcendence Retreat, you were like, I need the next big project.
Yeah.
And look how fast that arrived for you. I mean, it's just amazing. I think, I mean, you're doing it and we're all doing it to some degree, right? Even if you've
Yeah.
been at the same job for like 30 years, I had a reading that I did not so long ago with someone that, was laid off about 2 years before they planned to retire. And, they were devastated. They're like, oh my God, my whole plan has been, derailed. I'm like, you're 2 years from retirement. Did they give you a package? Yeah. I'm like, well, maybe it's just time to rethink the plan. Maybe we're actually already done. Right.
Yeah.
But we don't often think that way. We don't often have that deep trust in life. So I would invite you to trust your life, my friend, because it seems to be going really magically for you. And it seems like, it's very responsive to what you're asking for, even if you don't always believe it. So that's
Yeah.
just something that wanted to come through.
Thank you for that, great and profound mirror, because it's something I need to, constantly remind myself. I've never really had a plan. I mean, when I was younger, reading Steinbeck and Joyce and Kerouac, and I was just like, man, I want to live that life. I want to travel. I want to just express the beauty and the devastation and the joy and despair of life. And, you got to be careful what you ask for. But that's kind of it. That's kind of the plan. I mean, that is what dream tethering is. I've been following this dream, and in my first book, I said that the dream of the 17-year-old self, which is when I decided I wanted to be a writer, I started keeping a journal. I started asking to be used as an instrument of peace because I was just like, just speak through me. Like, I want to be a writer so bad, never knowing that there was anything like being a ghostwriter or editor, like not knowing any of these other possibilities exist. But I said that the dream of the 17-year-old self is like shooting a grappling hook out into the future. And if you're strong enough, focused enough, and determined enough to stay on the line, you're going to get there. But the external environment is always going to try and knock you off the line. And then in Dream Tether, I added, but the external environment is a mirror to your internal environment. So you really have to, you have to overcome that programming and conditioning and those core wounds that happen when we're very young. because they drop this, um, I was going to say a grotesque seed, but let's say a malnourished seed into your
Yeah, I like that
subconscious.
better.
And they just, if you don't become aware of it, that's what begins to grow, and it's that internal programming that I think dictates sort of how your life unfolds. But, in some ways, when the dream tether is greater than the programming, you're going to get there. And I've just stayed connected to this dream, and it's allowed me to work with all of these huge thought leaders, and I get to learn. I have intimate relationships with these people, and I get to like learn about their life and ask these questions. Well, what happened when your back was against the wall, the spear was against your neck, you didn't ask for this battle, it came to your door. And so, my own work is kind of a distillation, and a synthesis of my life experience in the mirror of what I get to learn from these thought leaders about consciousness or biology or business, etc.
So in the book, because I don't think you explained this yet, you're actually interviewing thought leaders about how they followed their dreams.
Oh, no, no, no,
No,
no,
no, no. You're talking
no.
about the people that you're working with.
Yeah, I'm talking about the process when I'm working with a thought leader.
Got it. Okay, cool. So let's talk about the dream tethering then, because I think that's such a beautiful concept. This idea that we have these hopes and dreams, we have like this vision. I think I talked about when I was on your show. I don't know if I've ever talked about it here, about how one of the big inciting incidents, one of the big moments for me on this process was, I think it was 2006, maybe the beginning of 2007. So, almost about 20 years ago. Um, I had an astrology reading, and in this reading, the astrologer like literally gave back to me like everything that had been my hopes and dreams since I was like, a teenager, and said like, "Oh, this is what you're here to do." And it just was like bomb exploded. I was like, oh, I got that back now. And it kind of sent me on this path and on this course. I'm still on it. Right. So that was my dream. Right. But talk to me about how do we stay connected with that, right? Because I mean, everything I recognize that everything in my life has brought me to the place that I am now. I don't regret any of it. Nothing was a waste, nothing was a loss. Everything has been of value. And yet, we do have this idea that life is more fun when we stay connected more and more with our dreams and with our true and highest selves. So talk to
Yeah.
me about that.
Well, I mean, I think, our dream is really our calling.
Okay.
And when what is a dream? A dream is a thought made manifest in the physical world. A dream is something you want to experience. So, I think that in order to stay connected to that dream, you have to align your mind, body, and spirit with right thinking, right language, right feeling, and right actions. And when all those align and you move forward with that internal energy, life, you become like the boring machine. A boring machine is what tunnels through rock, and matter conforms to your will. And all of these serendipities and synchronicities start showing up. I call it in the new book following the felt path, and
Okay.
they're breadcrumbs. And the breadcrumbs are leading you somewhere that you actually don't know yet. But, a breadcrumb is something, a serendipity, a synchronicity, something that jumps out of your external world into your internal world with such a registering force that you can't help but pay attention. So on its own, a breadcrumbs means nothing, but it gets logged in your mind. And then all of a sudden, other breadcrumbs start showing up. And then you realize, oh my gosh, this is a path. I don't know where it's leading me, and it's never ending, really. I mean, it's
Right.
never ending. It's this breadcrumbs led me to this. I had like three projects that I was kind of flirting with when I met you, and nothing was super lighting me up. But I was like, well, I gotta take one of these. And then I wound up connecting with this, big social media guy, and it happened really fast. And I went up to Malibu right before I moved from San Diego to Denver. And it wasn't exactly, the right fit. But I mean, I would have taken it if it was, but it was just a breadcrumb. It was like there's something better coming. And a lot of times, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it, throws these things in front of you. And it doesn't mean you have to take it. That is discernment. And
It's
that's
huge.
challenging. That's surrender and trust, which is, something I'm trying to master in my life. And if I distilled my work into two pillars, that's what dream tethering is about. Because you have to surrender and trust. Like, to follow your dream is not necessarily the logical path in the mirror of society,
Right.
but do you want to be fulfilled, or do you want to log the hours and then get to your deathbed and be, you see all these interviews on Instagram and stuff, and they find somebody at the end of their life and they have all this regret, and I don't want to live with regret.
Yeah.
I would love a steady paycheck, but I'm also doing what I love, and I'll get paid like a big chunk of money and then live up. That's how dream tethering came about. I was working on a project at the time. I was actually part of the research for this book was that I was training as a power lifter for 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah, nobody ever sees that one coming. I went from 170 to 184 in 3 months. And when that happened, there was like the project ended really quick, and I was like, I need to move on from this. And I wrote down in my notebook the things I wanted, and the next day, there was this huge shift, and I was like, oh, okay, now I just got what I asked for in 12 hours. So I need to figure out what's next. And I had just met a couple months prior Dr. Tobias Muller Bertram, who is an anesthesiologist turned medical entrepreneur. He's about to change healthcare. And he brought Joe Dispenza and UCSD together. And he was like, why don't you come to Palm Springs? He had a place there. At the time, he lived between San Diego, where his family was, and Palm Springs. And he spent like 3 or 4 nights out at Palm Springs building this company. And he's like, I got some work for you. So I worked with him. I made this chunk of money. And then he's like, why don't you just stay here until you finish your next book? And that's exactly what I wrote down. I'm like, I want like a safe place to just focus on my book. And I mean, there's so many little
Yeah.
manifesting stories and asking and
They're
happen.
amazing stories.
Yeah. But yeah, basically at the time I got introduced to this kind of legendary literary agent, and I handed him this stack of papers, and he chose the one that I liked best. And then I just started working on, I mean, I had like 3 titles before it came to dream tethering, but I would literally, I'd come to an end of a chapter, and I was living in Palm Springs, and there was this really amazing Native American land. No land has ever spoken to me like this before. And I would just put on my headphones to kind of distract my thinking brain. And I would ask myself the question I needed solved. Like, what's next in this chapter? 100% of the time, I got so many answers. And basically, this whole book kind of came through walking through the desert. And if you think about
Wow.
many people have gone to the desert, it's a place of resilience and it's a place of solitude. And I think those two aspects are really kind of how the desert speaks through you.
That's so beautiful. And as I told you off again off camera, and I haven't told listeners this, I don't know, maybe I have, I never know what I say. But I also received a book. I'm still working on it. Mine is beach walking receiving. But I, even when I used to write and study and everything, I think also the movement of your body is so powerful
100%.
in like getting you out of your head and doing that receiving. All right. I could talk to you forever. And I know we're going to keep the conversation going, but I like to keep these episodes in digestible chunks. So we're going to have to start to wind her down. I'm going to go to the question that I ask everybody on the show. We've kind of touched on it, but I want to kind of loop back to it now, and then we'll finish up on some parting words. But I ask everybody on the show, Tim, how do you experience your intuition?
Um, well, I told you this, I think off camera or in our last podcast, but Um, you know, as far as I guess I always go to writing because I'm a writer and sometimes those ideas don't make it into the book, but I hear this voice, which is myself, and it's like lecturing to me. And I noticed that it comes through the left side of my brain. So that's a very, it's the linear logical side. So it makes sense that it's a very, focused voice. But when I'm walking in the desert and I ask that question, it's like this torrent of information comes through the right side of my brain. And I'm just scribbling. That's the creative side.
Right.
So I'm just like scribbling things as fast as I can. Um, I guess in life, I could get stuck on a menu and like, get paralyzed by that. But it pops in and it makes sense and I move on it. It's taken me all over the world. I bought a one-way ticket to India, traveled for 15 months. I've gone to South Africa. I moved to Mexico for love. That didn't work out, but I got good stories out of it. So, yeah, I mean, it's funny. I don't know if it's the loudest voice or it's just maybe it's the most calm voice.
Love it. Yeah. I mean, that's how it speaks to me. It's always calm. It's always loving. It's always gentle, and it's always spot on. But there's that, you alluded to it throughout. There's that active surrender that comes to listening to your intuition, right? Where the
Mhm.
mind tries to fill in the blanks and the mind tries to control and the mind wants to know and define and have it all settled and done. When even my energy gets stressed when I think about living that way. When we're following our intuition, it's you have an intention, you have a curiosity, you have like a focus, and then you kind of let it go. And then I often give the example, and this is a terrible one for you because you're a guy, but we see, I don't know anyone who actually does this, but you spritz perfume into the air in front of you and then you walk into it. And I guess I've seen it in the movies. It's a great way to perfume yourself. But I often feel like intuition is or cologne. I feel sometimes like intuition is like that. We put the intention, we let it go, and then it finds us and we find it, and it's that perfect moment of alignment where you listen and you get the nudge. And sometimes too it's not an internal experience, right? It's a synchronicity, or it's editing out something in your life doesn't work out to bring you towards the thing that is gonna work out. But it works best, I think, when we are able to let go. And it seems like, believe it or not, I don't know if you do this, but having listened to you for 30 minutes, I think that you're probably really good at that letting go place, because you have to like let go a little bit in order to receive.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it probably comes down to, um, if you believe it's a loving voice and a loving universe and it's a benevolent universe, then you follow that. And I think that's creatorship.
Yeah.
And we are a mirror of the creator. If you think we live in a malevolent universe, then you are always going to be a victim, and you're going to be pissed off and angry. And again, that all comes back to our reality is a mirror of our thoughts.
Yeah. No, I think that's beautiful. I think that's a beautiful place to start to wind down. When we trust in ourselves, when we trust in life, when we trust in the universe, right? It's from that great place of trust that miracles happen. And
Oh yeah.
where you can't find that yet, that's okay. That's okay. Just look for it where you can. And then I always say too, where you're feeling like, wow, life is slapping me in the face and I can't, all this water is going up my nose and I can't breathe, then you soothe yourself and you remind yourself this is part of the human experience too. It's going to get better, the sun's going to come out, you're going to get to shore, or whatever metaphor you want to use. And then you go back to reminding yourself that life is on your side, and it will show you that it most truly is.
Yeah, and that you're safe. When my
Yeah.
mind's spinning out, um, you don't feel safe, but you're sitting in your house and
Yeah.
everything's fine, but you just have to kind of, like you said, soothe yourself.
Yeah. All right. I think we got to wind this one down before we tell people how to find you. What's your offering other than your book? Where do you want me to send people? I didn't ask you that question before
Well,
we
they
hit
can go to
live.
they can go to the Real Tim Shields
Okay. Oh, the
website.
podcast. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the
Sorry. Go ahead.
podcast is the Inciting Incident. It's on all the platforms. The Real Tim Shields is also Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I'm going to start teaching. I do writing coaching, and I'm going to start teaching a course that I have, which is my process called the Quantum Writer. I will probably do that in groups. I also do it privately. But yeah, I mean, at the moment, it's just that I'm finally getting to the point where, like, you know what, I just got to get out there. I got to get on stages. I got to start talking and teaching this, because I think it doesn't exist. I mean, it's a distillation of a lot of people's work, but there's a new model of self-actualization, a new hero's journey as the evolution of consciousness. And really, I think that's kind of what we're doing here.
Yeah. And
We're evolving our soul and our spirit.
I have a dear friend who's also, a writer who's helped many super, super well-known folks write their books, as well as she sold I think 10 million copies of her books. But one of the,
Wow.
yeah, she wrote a children's book. So a lot of it's like Scholastic Book Fair, she said, but I still think it's super impressive. This is Lisa McCourt, who's been on the show a couple of times, for those of you who've been listening for a while. But, something that she said to me that I think is so powerful, she's like, when you write your book, it's going to be your perspective on all of this stuff. And it's going to be unique and valuable just because of that.
Yes.
And I feel like even more, as teachers, is like one of the things my guides tell me again and again and again and again is what we're here to do is actually to express our unique perspective in this human form, and express your soul's wisdom for sure, but also your soul's wisdom as it dances with that human experience, right? Because that's what you're here to do. And your uniqueness is the greatest gift that you give to both yourself and humanity.
100%. Yeah.
And I think as a writer, when you write it from your voice, that's it, you're done. That's what you're here to do.
Yeah. The producer, Rick Rubin, the famous music producer, always says, if you try to do it for the public, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
It's about expressing your uniqueness and your voice in the world.
Yeah. I love that. All right. This was so much fun. You guys want to check out his podcast, at least to see me, but also because he's a really good interviewer. And it was, I've been on a lot of these things, and it was just a super fun conversation. And so I'm pretty sure that, the other conversations that he has on his podcast are also really good. So definitely check that out. We'll have all the information, as we always do, in the show notes, so you can find Tim there. Tim, any last words before we wrap this one up?
I think we just have to remember that, we're here to create. And when you are a creator, you are supported by creation. And, we're so trained to focus on the 3D world, but everything comes out of energy, and that cascades down. So really you gotta get beyond yourself, tap into that energy above, for lack of a better word, and bring that into your life. And that's how you become a divine creator.
I love that. I love that. Tim, thank you so much. It was such a fun conversation. Listeners, thank you so much. I know I say it every time, but thanks to you, I get to do this, and I love doing this. So I'm really grateful. I'd probably do this anyway, but Tim might not, It's always enticing when it's a podcast. No, but really, thank you guys.
I love these conversations. So thank you so much.
Yeah. So thank each and every one of you. Love you all. If you like what you heard, subscribe, do the stuff. We really appreciate it. It helps get the word out, and share with your friends. And very most importantly, just keep listening, because love what I do and love sharing it with you. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, and namaste.